A hush falls over the charity gala as she enters. Annalise, 7 months pregnant and radiant in emerald silk. Her hand instinctively resting on her swollen belly. Her husband, the millionaire titan Julian Croft, is by her side, the epitome of devotion. But then across the crowded room, a flash of familiar brilliance catches her eye. On the hand of a stunning redhead, draped in diamonds, is a ring, her wedding ring. The one-of-a-kind, custom-made symbol of her life, her love, her future. In that gut-wrenching moment, her perfect world shatters. But this is not a story of a woman broken. This is the story of a wife's cold, calculated revenge that will bring a king to his knees, weeping amongst the ruins of his empire. Annalise had always believed their life was a fairy tale. She'd met Julian Croft at a Sotheby's auction where she was a junior art appraiser, and he was the enigmatic billionaire bidding on a rare Monet. He hadn't won the painting, but he had, in his own words, won the greatest prize in the room. Their courtship was a whirlwind of private jets to Paris for dinner, surprise trips to see the northern lights from a glass igloo in Finland, and a proposal on a private yacht in the shadow of the Amalfi coast. He was charming, attentive, and utterly intoxicating. Their wedding was the stuff of legends, a multi-million-dollar affair at the Oheka Castle on Long Island, featured in the glossy pages of Vogue. Julian had presented her with the ring, a breathtaking 7-carat, cushion-cut diamond, flanked by 2 rare pink diamonds set in a custom-designed platinum band that mirrored the scrollwork of the castle's gates. "A ring for a queen," he had whispered, his blue eyes earnest. "A symbol of a love as unique and unbreakable as this diamond." Annalise, a woman who had grown up in a modest suburban home, was swept away by the sheer grandeur of it all, but more so by the seeming sincerity in his gaze. Life as Mrs. Croft was lived in a gilded cage, though for the first few years, Annalise only saw the gold. Their penthouse on Park Avenue offered panoramic views of Central Park, a canvas that changed with the seasons. Their staff, a silent, efficient army, catered to their every whim. She had a black Amex with no limit, a personal shopper at Bergdorf's, and a garage filled with cars she rarely drove. Julian was a demanding husband, his schedule packed with international business trips and high-stakes meetings. But he always made time for her, or so it seemed. He'd fly home from Tokyo just to have dinner with her, showering her with lavish gifts that served as glittering apologies for his absence. He was the architect of her life, and she, in her love-dazed state, had willingly handed him the blueprints. He encouraged her to leave her job at Sotheby's, arguing that a Croft shouldn't be working for anyone else. He suggested she focus on philanthropy, a more suitable role for a woman of her new stature. Annalise, eager to please the man she adored, had agreed. She poured her energy into chairing committees for children's hospitals and art foundations, her name becoming synonymous with high society charity. The first crack in the gilded facade appeared subtly. It was a stray text message she glimpsed on his phone late one night. "You left your watch here." The name was unfamiliar, KV. When she'd casually asked about it the next morning, Julian had been smooth dismissive. KV. "Oh, Ken Velocity, one of my VPs. We were working late at the office. He's a bit of a mess, always leaving things behind." It was a plausible lie delivered with the easy confidence of a man who rarely had to explain himself. Annalise, wanting to believe him, let it go. But then came other things. The scent of a perfume that wasn't hers, lingering on his suit jacket. A heady, musky scent, so different from her light floral fragrances. The late-night board meetings that stretched into the early hours of the morning. The hushed phone calls he would take on the terrace, his back turned to her, his voice a low, urgent murmur. Each instance was a small stone dropped into the placid pool of her marriage, sending out ripples of unease. When she told him she was pregnant, Julian had been ecstatic, or at least he'd performed the part convincingly. He'd swept her up in his arms, his eyes shining with what she took for joyous tears. A son, he'd boomed, already certain of the gender. An heir to the Croft empire. He became even more attentive, if that were possible. He hired a private chef to cater to her pregnancy cravings, a prenatal yoga instructor, and a team of the best doctors in New York City. He would rest his hand on her growing belly, a proprietary gesture that she found both comforting and vaguely unsettling. "My two most precious assets," he would say, his voice thick with a satisfaction that in hindsight felt more like a banker admiring his portfolio than a husband cherishing his family. Yet even amidst the flurry of preparations for the baby, the disconnect grew. He was physically present more often, but emotionally he seemed 1,000 miles away. He was more guarded with his phone, his laptop always angled away from her. The business trips became more frequent now, with the added excuse of securing the legacy for our son. He went to Singapore, to Dubai, to London. Annalise, grounded by her advancing pregnancy, was left behind in the silent, opulent penthouse, the city lights glittering below like a sea of distant stars. It was during his last trip, a supposed 3-day conference in Geneva, that the lie began to unravel completely. He called her every night, his voice a warm caress over the phone lines, telling her how much he missed her, how he couldn't wait to come home to his beautiful wife and their unborn child. On the second night, while they were talking, she heard a faint sound in the background, the distinctive chime of the funicular at the Grand Hotel Victoria in Interlaken, a sound she remembered vividly from a trip they had taken early in their relationship. Geneva was miles from Interlaken. "Where are you, Julian? It sounds so lovely," she'd asked, her voice light, betraying none of the cold dread that was beginning to seep into her veins. There was a split second of silence, a digital void that stretched for an eternity. "Just in the hotel lobby, darling," he'd replied, his voice a little too loud, a little too jovial. "It's quite a grand place. Reminds me a little of that spot in Interlaken, actually. Funny you should say that." Funny. That night, Annalise didn't sleep. The gilded cage had begun to feel like a prison, the panoramic views mocking her confinement. She thought of her wedding ring, the weighty symbol of their unbreakable love, sitting on her finger. She had taken it off a week ago, her fingers too swollen from the pregnancy. It sat in its velvet box in their wall safe, waiting. Julian had noticed its absence and insisted she wear it on a chain around her neck, but she had refused, saying it was uncomfortable. The truth was, she couldn't bear the feel of it against her skin. The cold metal, a constant reminder of the chilling distance growing between them. The day of the annual Miracles for Kids Gala, the flagship event of her philanthropic calendar, arrived. Julian had flown back from Geneva that morning, looking tanned and refreshed. He presented her with an obscenely large bouquet of her favorite white peonies and a new diamond necklace. "To adorn my beautiful queen tonight," he'd said, his smile never quite reaching his eyes. Annalise played her part, the adoring, expectant wife. She allowed him to fasten the necklace around her neck, her skin crawling at his touch. She smiled and thanked him, her heart a leaden weight in her chest. As she got ready, her glam squad, a team of 4 who descended upon the penthouse like a whirlwind of hairspray and couture, chattered excitedly around her. They dressed her in a custom-made emerald silk gown by Brandon Maxwell, the deep green hue complementing her auburn hair. The fabric skimmed her baby bump, a testament to the life she was carrying, a life she would protect with the ferocity of a lioness. As she surveyed her reflection in the mirror, she saw a woman she barely recognized. The naivety was gone from her eyes, replaced by a hard, crystalline clarity. The fairy tale was over. She was the queen of a crumbling castle, married to a king of lies. And as she prepared to step into the public eye to play her role on the grand stage of New York society, she had no idea that tonight the final brutal truth would be revealed not in a hushed whisper, but in the audacious, blinding sparkle of her own wedding ring on another woman's hand. She felt a grim resolve settle over her. The gilded cage was about to be blown wide open, and she would be the one holding the dynamite. The ballroom at the Plaza Hotel was a sea of glittering opulence. Crystal chandeliers dripping with thousands of hand-cut prisms cast a warm, golden glow over the city's elite. The air hummed with the murmur of polite conversation, the clinking of champagne flutes, and the soft strains of a string quartet. Annalise moved through the crowd with a practiced grace, her hand linked through Julian's arm. She smiled, she nodded. She accepted compliments on her gown and her radiant pregnancy glow. Each smile felt like a crack in a carefully constructed mask. Julian was in his element, the master of this universe. He greeted fellow titans of industry with firm handshakes and powerful men in politics with knowing smiles. He introduced Annalise with a possessive pride, his hand always resting on the small of her back, or more frequently, on her stomach. "My brilliant wife, Annalise," he would say, "the heart of my world and the mother of my future." People would coo, impressed by the public display of affection, the picture of a perfect, powerful couple. Annalise felt like a prop in his elaborate stage play. She scanned the faces in the crowd, a knot of anxiety tightening in her chest. Every beautiful woman who laughed a little too long at Julian's jokes, every admiring glance that lingered on him sent a jolt of suspicion through her. Was it her or her? The paranoia was a bitter taste in her mouth, a stark contrast to the sweet champagne she couldn't drink. They took their seats at the head table, a position of honor befitting their status as the event's primary benefactors. Annalise was seated between Julian and a desiccated old-money matron whose diamonds looked as ancient as her lineage. The program began a series of speeches and a heart-wrenching video about the children the foundation helped. Annalise watched, her heart genuinely moved, but her mind was elsewhere. It was a strange, disorienting duality to be so publicly celebrated for her compassion, while her private world was consumed by a cold, burgeoning rage. Julian leaned over, his breath warm against her ear. "You've outdone yourself this year, my love. A record-breaking fundraiser." He squeezed her thigh under the table, a gesture that was meant to be intimate but felt invasive. "We make a damn good team." Annalise simply smiled, a tight, brittle thing. "It's all for the children," she said, her voice a placid surface above a churning abyss of turmoil. It was during the live auction, the centerpiece of the evening's fundraising, that her world finally imploded. The auctioneer was a fast-talking, charismatic man, coaxing bids from the city's wealthiest patrons for extravagant prizes a week on a private island, a walk-on role in a Hollywood blockbuster, a vintage Porsche. Julian Ever the Showman was an active participant, his hand shooting up to place ever higher bids, drawing gasps and applause from the crowd. He had just won a private dinner for 10, cooked by the world-renowned chef Daniel Hum of 11 Madison Park, for a staggering $200,000. A wave of applause erupted, and Julian stood to take a bow, a magnanimous smile plastered on his face. As he settled back into his seat, Basking in the glow of his public largesse, Annalise's gaze drifted across the room. And then she saw her. She was standing near the back of the ballroom, partially obscured by a large floral arrangement. A striking redhead, with a cascade of fiery curls, poured into a swan-red dress that clung to her every curve. She was laughing, her head thrown back, a flute of champagne held aloft in a slender, elegant hand. And on that hand, on the third finger, was a flash of brilliance that was as familiar to Annalise as her own reflection. Time seemed to slow down. The auctioneer's patter faded into a distant buzz. The murmuring of the crowd became a dull roar. Annalise's entire being focused on that single searing point of light. It couldn't be. Her mind rebelled, searching for a rational explanation. It was a similar ring, a coincidence, a cruel trick of the light. But she knew. She knew the way the light caught the facets of the cushion-cut diamond. She knew the fiery sparkle of the two rare pink diamonds that flanked it. She knew the intricate scrolling design of the platinum band, a design she had sketched herself. A design that was supposed to symbolize their unique, eternal love. It was her wedding ring, the one-of-a-kind masterpiece by the legendary jeweler Jar that Julian had commissioned for her. The ring that was supposed to be locked securely in their safe at home. The redhead lifted her hand to brush a stray curl from her face, and the ring caught the full glare of the chandelier. It was an audacious, ostentatious display. A declaration. The woman's eyes swept the room, and for a fleeting, terrifying moment, they met Annalise's. There was no flicker of recognition, no sign of guilt. Just a cool, appraising glance, the look of a victor surveying her territory. A wave of nausea so intense it almost buckled her, washed over Annalise. The air in the ballroom suddenly felt thick, suffocating. The emerald silk of her gown was a vice squeezing the breath from her lungs. This was KV. This was the woman whose perfume clung to her husband's suits. This was the woman he was with in Geneva, or rather, Interlaken. This was the woman who had not only stolen her husband, but had the audacity, the unmitigated gall to wear the symbol of her sacred vows on her own hand, in a room full of people who knew Annalise as Julian's wife. She turned to Julian, her movement stiff, robotic. He was oblivious, smiling at someone across the table, the picture of contentment. The betrayal was so profound, so brazen it was almost surreal. He hadn't just cheated on her. He had given this woman the most intimate, meaningful symbol of their marriage. He had, in effect, replaced her. Her vision tunneled. The room began to spin. She saw the redhead again, now talking to a man Annalise recognized as one of Julian's junior executives. She was animated, confident, the ring flashing with every gesture. It was a performance, and Annalise was the unwilling, unknowing audience. "Julian," she said, her voice a strangled whisper. It was a testament to her iron will that any sound came out at all. He turned to her, his smile faltering slightly at the sight of her pale, stricken face. "What is it, darling? Are you feeling unwell? Is it the baby?" "I need some air," she managed to say, her hand gripping the edge of the table to steady herself. "Of course," he said instantly, solicitous the concerned husband act snapping back into place. He stood and helped her to her feet, his touch now feeling like a brand on her skin. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said to the table, his voice smooth as silk. "My wife is feeling a little faint. Please excuse us." As he guided her out of the ballroom, his arm firmly around her. Annalise risked one last look over her shoulder. The redhead was watching them go, a small, knowing smirk playing on her lips. It was a look of triumph. They reached the relative quiet of the hotel's grand corridor, its marble floors and gilded mirrors reflecting their distorted images. Annalise pulled away from him, stumbling against a velvet settee. "Annalise, what's wrong?" Julian asked, his brow furrowed with a performance of concern. Annalise looked at him. Truly, looked at him for the first time in a long time. She saw the handsome face, the charming smile, the expensive, perfectly tailored tuxedo. But underneath it all, she saw the lie. She saw the hollowness, the deceit, the casual cruelty of a man who could so completely and utterly desecrate their life together. She didn't scream. She didn't cry. The shock was too deep, the betrayal too absolute for tears. A terrifying glacial calm settled over her. It was the calm of a dormant volcano, the pressure building, the magma churning just beneath the surface. "Who is she?" she asked, her voice eerily level. Julian's face went blank. "Who is who?" "Darling, you're not making any sense. You need to sit down. I'll get you some water." "The redhead," Annalise said, her eyes boring into his. "In the red dress, the one wearing my wedding ring." The color drained from Julian's face. For the first time since she had known him, the mask of confident control slipped, revealing a flicker of pure, unadulterated panic. He opened his mouth, but no words came out. The master manipulator, the king of lies, was for once speechless. Annalise didn't need his confession. The truth was there in his terrified eyes. It was there, glittering on another woman's hand in a crowded ballroom. The fairy tale hadn't just ended. It had been a lie from the very beginning. And in that moment, in the cold, gilded corridor of the Plaza Hotel, the heartbroken wife died, and a woman bent on revenge was born. The ride home in the back of the Maybach was a study in suffocating silence. The city lights smeared across the windows, a kaleidoscope of colors that Annalise didn't see. She sat pressed against her door, as far from Julian as the plush leather seats would allow. The glacial calm that had descended upon her in the hotel corridor had solidified into something harder, colder. It was the calm of a battlefield after the initial devastating volley, the air thick with the promise of more violence to come. Julian, for his part, attempted to fill the void with clumsy, desperate lies. It was a misunderstanding, Annalise. A terrible, terrible mistake. She's no one, a business acquaintance, who is obsessed, delusional. The ring. She must have had a replica made. It's insane, I know. I'll deal with it. I'll call security. Annalise remained silent, her gaze fixed on the passing cityscape. Every word he spoke was an insult to her intelligence, another shovelful of dirt on the grave of their marriage. A replica of a one-of-a-kind jar creation. The absurdity of it was almost laughable. He was treating her like an idiot, a hysterical pregnant woman who could be soothed with platitudes and pathetic falsehoods. He had no idea who he was sitting next to anymore. The compliant, adoring wife he had molded was gone. In her place was a stranger, a woman with ice in her veins and a storm gathering in her soul. When they arrived at the penthouse, the silence followed them, thick and menacing. The vast, art-filled rooms, once a source of pride and comfort, now felt like a mausoleum. Annalise walked directly to the master suite and stood before the walk-in closet, a room larger than most New York apartments. She began to pack. Not her own things. His. She pulled his Tom Ford suits from their hangers, the fabric a reminder of his scent, his presence. She let them fall to the floor in a heap. She swept his collection of Patek Philippe watches from their velvet-lined trays into a canvas laundry bag. She emptied his drawers of silk ties, monogrammed shirts, and cashmere sweaters. She worked with a methodical, dispassionate fury, her movements economical and precise. Julian watched her, his panic escalating into a frantic desperation. "Annalise, please stop this. Let's talk. We can fix this. Whatever you think you saw, it's not what it seems." She didn't grace him with a response. She was no longer a participant in his reality. She was creating her own. "It's the pregnancy," he said, his voice taking on a wheedling, condescending tone. "Your hormones are all over the place. You're being emotional. Let's just sleep on it. Everything will look different in the morning." That was the final straw. The casual, dismissive chauvinism of his words ignited the volcano. Annalise stopped her packing and turned to face him, her eyes blazing with a cold fire. "Emotional?" she said, her voice dangerously quiet. "You think I'm being emotional? Let me tell you what I'm feeling, Julian. I'm feeling clarity. For the first time in years. I see you. I see you for the pathetic, narcissistic, lying coward that you are." She picked up the canvas bag, heavy with his expensive watches. "You didn't just cheat on me, Julian. You gave her my ring. My ring. The one you said was a symbol of our unbreakable love. You took the most sacred promise we made, and you pinned it on your whore like a prize ribbon." She walked towards him, and for the first time he flinched, taking a step back. "You didn't just break my heart," she continued, her voice rising with each word. "You tried to break my spirit. You isolated me. You made me dependent on you. You turned me into a pretty accessory for your gilded life. And you thought I was too stupid, too weak, too emotional to ever see it." She was standing directly in front of him now, the full force of her fury directed at him. He looked smaller, somehow diminished. The powerful titan of industry was just a man, a cheating husband caught in a lie. "You're right about one thing," she said, her voice dropping back to a lethal whisper. "Things will look different in the morning, because in the morning you will be gone." She thrust the heavy bag into his chest. "Get out of my house." "Your house?" he sputtered, a flash of his old arrogance returning. "Annalise, be reasonable. This is my name on the deed, my money that paid for everything. You have nothing." A slow, chilling smile spread across Annalise's face. It was a smile that did not reach her eyes. "That's where you're wrong, Julian. I have something you never counted on. I have a brain. And while you were out playing games, I was learning. While you were building your empire, I was watching. I know your business. I know your secrets. I know where all the bodies are buried. You see, I was the perfect supportive wife. I listened during those endless dinner parties with your lawyers and your bankers. I read the documents you so carelessly left on your desk. I paid attention." The color drained from his face again. He had always underestimated her, seen her as a beautiful but ultimately decorative part of his life. He had never considered her a threat. "You have until sunrise to be gone," she said, her voice final. "Take what you can carry. The rest will be disposed of." With that, she turned her back on him and walked out of the room, leaving him standing amidst the ruins of his wardrobe, the dawning horror of his miscalculation finally sinking in. Annalise did not sleep. The adrenaline surging through her was a powerful stimulant. She went not to her own bedroom, but to the Home Office, a sleek, modern room that Julian had always considered his exclusive domain. She sat down in his large leather chair. It still felt warm. She booted up his computer. As she had predicted, He hadn't even bothered to log out. His arrogance was his Achilles heel. Her mind, once clouded by love and denial, was now a finely tuned instrument of vengeance. She was no longer just a scorned wife. She was the architect of ruin. Her first call was at 3 a.m. to her father, a retired, unassuming high school history teacher from Queens. He was the moral compass of her life. She told him everything, the words pouring out of her in a calm, steady stream. There was no hysteria, only the cold, hard facts. He didn't interrupt. He just listened. When she was done, there was a pause. "What do you need, Annie?" he asked, his voice a balm of unconditional support. "I need a warrior," she said. Her second call was to a name she had filed away in her memory from one of those long, tedious dinner parties, a name Julian had mentioned with a mixture of fear and respect. Delilah Vance, a notorious shark-like divorce attorney, known for eviscerating powerful men. Her specialty was forensic accounting, finding the money that philandering husbands tried to hide. Her slogan, whispered in hushed tones in the powder rooms of the Upper East Side, was, "I don't get you a settlement, I get you the company." Her third call was to a man named Marco. He was the head of her security detail, a former Mossad agent whom Julian had hired, but who had developed a quiet, paternal loyalty to Annalise. He was a man of few words and immense capability. "Marco," she said when he answered on the first ring, "I have a situation. I need you at the apartment in 1 hour, and I need a team, a discreet team." By the time the first pale light of dawn crept over the Manhattan skyline, Annalise's war room was assembled. Marco and his team, two grim-faced men who looked like they could walk through walls, had secured the apartment. They had escorted a stunned, disheveled Julian, carrying a single suitcase and a laundry bag of watches, out of the building. They had changed the locks, the codes, and swept the entire penthouse for listening devices. Annalise, still in her emerald silk gown from the night before, stood at the panoramic window, watching the sunrise. The city was waking up a sprawling, indifferent beast. But Annalise was not indifferent. She was focused. She was energized. She was about to go to war. She thought of the baby, kicking gently inside her. This was no longer just about her. It was about her child. Her child would not be raised in the shadow of a liar. Her child would not be a pawn in an empire of deceit. She would build her own empire, an empire of truth and strength on the ashes of Julian's. She looked at her reflection in the window. The woman staring back at her was a stranger forged in the fires of betrayal. The pain was still there, a deep, aching wound. But now it was overlaid with something else, a steely, unwavering resolve. She was no longer Julian Croft's wife. She was Annalise Varenne, her father's daughter. And she was about to become Julian Croft's reckoning. The game had just begun, and she was changing all the rules. The days that followed were a masterclass in calculated demolition. While Julian was likely holed up in a hotel suite, licking his wounds and underestimating her yet again, Annalise was assembling her army and laying the groundwork for his complete and utter ruin. The penthouse, once a symbol of her gilded captivity, became her command center. The dining room table where she had hosted countless insipid dinners for Julian's associates was now covered in laptops, legal documents, and financial statements. Her first meeting was with Delilah Vance. The lawyer was exactly as advertised, sharp, impeccably dressed in a steel-gray Armani suit, with eyes that seemed to see right through to the bottom line. She listened to Annalise's story without a flicker of emotion, her perfectly manicured fingers steepled under her chin. "The ring is a gift," Delilah said, her voice a low, precise purr. "Legally, it's his to give. Morally, it's a declaration of war. And in a war, we take no prisoners." She smiled, a flash of predatory brilliance. "You've come to the right place, Mrs. Croft. Or should I say, Miss Varenne." Ms. Varenne Annalise confirmed, a surge of strength coursing through her. "And I don't just want a divorce, Delilah. I want to dismantle him. I want to take away everything he values. His money, his reputation, his company." Delilah finished for her. "Standard procedure. What assets do we know about? And more importantly, what assets do we not know about?" This was where Annalise's years as the observant, underestimated wife paid off. She began to speak her memory, a steel trap. She detailed offshore accounts in the Cayman Islands that Julian had bragged about after too much single malt scotch. She recalled hushed conversations about shell corporations used to acquire properties in London and Hong Kong. She remembered the names of executives he'd paid off, the government contracts he'd secured through less than legal means, the creative accounting practices he'd joked about with his CFO. Delilah's eyes, which had been sharp before, now gleamed with the avaricious delight of a treasure hunter who had just been handed a map. "Ms. Varenne," she said, pulling a specialized encrypted laptop from her briefcase. "You are a goddamn gift. My forensic team will have a field day with this. We're not just going to divorce him, we're going to flay him." While Delilah's team of financial bloodhounds began their digital hunt, Annalise turned her attention to the more personal front of her campaign. She knew that to truly break Julian, she had to attack his ego, the most fragile and inflated part of him. Her next move was subtle but devastating. Through a discreet public relations firm, recommended by Delilah, she leaked a story to Page 6, the Bible of New York gossip. The item was carefully worded, a masterpiece of insinuation. It spoke of a beloved philanthropic power couple on the brink of collapse. It hinted at a brazen, flame-haired mistress and a symbolic betrayal that has left the beautiful expectant wife reeling. It didn't name names, but in their rarefied world, it didn't have to. The city's elite would know exactly who the column was about. The fallout was immediate. Annalise's phone, which she had set to silent, lit up with calls and texts from concerned friends. Julian, predictably, was furious. He left a string of increasingly unhinged voicemails, alternating between threats and pathetic pleas. Annalise listened to them with a detached sense of satisfaction, then forwarded them to Delilah's legal team. That she moved on to the art. Julian's collection was his pride and joy, a tangible representation of his wealth and supposed sophistication. It was also, as Annalise knew, almost entirely in her name. In the early days of their marriage, in a move designed to protect his assets from potential business liabilities, he had purchased and registered the entire collection, the Monet, the Warhol, the Basquiat, under Annalise Varenne. He had seen it as a clever legal maneuver. He had never imagined she would be the liability. Annalise contacted Sotheby's, her former employer. She spoke to her old boss, a man who had always been fond of her and had been disappointed when she'd left. She explained in vague but compelling terms that she was entering a new chapter of her life and wished to liquidate some of her assets. The timing was perfect. The fall auction season was approaching. The press release from Sotheby's announcing the private collection of Annalise Varenne for sale was a bombshell. It listed the key pieces, their staggering estimates, sending shockwaves through the art world. For Julian, this was a public castration. His friends, his business partners, his rivals. Everyone would see that his precious art collection was being sold off by his estranged wife. It was a direct hit to his reputation, a sign that the great Julian Croft was losing control. But Annalise's masterstroke was yet to come. It involved the Mistress. The woman she now knew was named Kendra Vance, no relation to her lawyer, a fact that provided a moment of dark cosmic humor. Annalise had Marco and his team do a thorough but discreet investigation into Kendra. The results were both predictable and useful. Kendra was a former model turned brand consultant, a profession that seemed to involve accompanying wealthy men to exotic locations. She had a taste for the finer things in life and a significant social media presence, a curated feed of luxury travel designer clothes and cryptic captions about living her best life. Annalise studied Kendra's Instagram feed like a general studying a battlefield map. She saw photos taken on the terrace of a hotel in Interlaken, posted during the time Julian was supposedly in Geneva. She saw a picture of a new Cartier watch, a gift from a special someone, posted a week after Julian had claimed a late-night board meeting. Kendra wasn't just a mistress. She was a braggart, and her vanity would be her undoing. Annalise's plan was audacious, and it required a key piece of information: the location of the ring. She knew Kendra would be flaunting it. After the gala, the woman had become bolder, posting a blurry photo of her hand on a man's chest, the 7-carat diamond deliberately in focus. The opportunity came in the form of the annual Serpentine Summer Party, a major event on the international social circuit held in London. Julian was a co-chair of the event. It was the perfect stage. Annalise knew he would be there, desperate to project an image of normalcy and control, and she knew he would bring Kendra. It was his style, arrogant, defiant, and stupid. Annalise would not be attending. Her revenge would be delivered remotely. She booked a suite at the Connaught, her favorite London hotel. She flew in 2 days before the party, her baby bump now a prominent, undeniable statement of her reality. She met with a specialized team that Delilah had arranged, a group of former British intelligence officers who now ran a high-end corporate espionage firm. Her instructions were precise. They were to infiltrate the Serpentine Party. They were not to approach Julian or Kendra. Their mission was focused on one thing, and one thing only: the ring. "I don't want it back," Annalise told the lead agent, a man with pale, watchful eyes. "I want it documented. I want high-resolution, undeniable proof that she is wearing it at this event with him. I want video, I want photos. I want to be able to see the hallmark inside the band." The night of the party, Annalise sat in her hotel suite, a live feed from her team displayed on a large screen. She watched as Julian and Kendra arrived, a tableau of smug defiance. Kendra was stunning in a silver gown, her red hair a fiery beacon, and on her finger, sparkling under the lights of the paparazzi flashbulbs, was Annalise's ring. Annalise's team was flawless. A waiter with a camera in his tie pin, a woman pretending to be a tipsy guest, stumbling into Kendra and getting a close-up shot with her phone, a long lens camera from a concealed position across the lawn. They captured it all. The ring on Kendra's finger as she held Julian's hand, the ring as she lifted a glass of champagne to her lips, the ring as she gesticulated animatedly in conversation with one of Julian's business rivals. But the final piece of the plan was the most vicious. Annalise had learned that Julian was in the middle of closing a massive career-defining merger with a conservative family-run Japanese tech conglomerate, a company run by the elderly traditionalist Mr. Tanaka. The deal was worth billions and was in its final delicate stages. Mr. Tanaka, as it happened, was the guest of honor at the Serpentine Party. Annalise waited until she saw her team's footage of Mr. Tanaka shaking hands with Julian. Then she gave the signal. She had hired a translator. She had drafted a letter. And she had prepared a package. The package contained the high-resolution photos and video of Kendra wearing the ring at the party. It also contained a copy of Annalise and Julian's wedding announcement from Vogue, with a beautifully captioned photo of the very same ring on Annalise's finger. It included a brief, elegantly worded note translated into perfect Japanese. The note, written from the perspective of a concerned friend of the Croft family, expressed deep worry over Mr. Croft's erratic and dishonorable behavior. It spoke of the deep shame of flaunting a mistress wearing his pregnant wife's sacred wedding ring in front of a respected business partner. It didn't ask for anything. It simply presented the devastating, undeniable facts. The package was delivered by a discreet courier to Mr. Tanaka's hotel, the Dorchester, at midnight. Annalise turned off the live feed. She stood and walked to the window, looking out over the sleeping city of London. She felt no joy, no triumph, just the cold, grim satisfaction of a plan perfectly executed. She had used Julian's own arrogance, his own tools of wealth and power against him. She had turned his public stage into a platform for his own humiliation. The symphony of destruction was reaching its crescendo. The financial ruin was coming. The social disgrace was in motion, and the final crushing blow was about to land. She placed a hand on her belly, feeling the strong, steady kick of her child. This was her new empire, and its foundations were being built on the scorched earth of Julian Croft's world. The call came 2 days later. Annalise was back in New York in her war room finalizing the details of the Sotheby's auction with a representative. Her phone buzzed, displaying a number she didn't recognize, but the London country code was unmistakable. She excused herself and took the call. It was Mr. Tanaka's chief of staff. His English was formal, precise. "Ms. Varenne," he began without preamble. "Mr. Tanaka extends his deepest apologies for the dishonor you have faced. He has reviewed the information that was brought to his attention. The merger with Croft Enterprises has been terminated effective immediately. Mr. Tanaka believes that a man who shows such profound disrespect to his own family cannot be a trustworthy business partner. He wishes you and your child health and peace." Annalise closed her eyes, a single slow tear tracing a path down her cheek. It wasn't a tear of sadness, but of vindication. It was the first tear she had shed since that night at the gala. It was a release. The first domino had fallen, and it was a domino the size of a skyscraper. The news of the failed merger hit the financial world like a thunderclap. The stock of Croft Enterprises, already shaky from the rumors of Julian's marital strife, plummeted. It dropped 20% in the first hour of trading, then 30%. Analysts on Bloomberg and CNBC were scrambling, speaking of a catastrophic collapse of confidence in Julian Croft's leadership. His carefully constructed image as an invincible Midas touch dealmaker was shattered overnight. Julian, who had flown back from London in a panic, was now in full-blown meltdown. His voicemails, which Annalise continued to archive as evidence, had devolved into a pathetic mix of rage threats of financial ruin against her and desperate, tearful pleas for forgiveness. He was a cornered animal lashing out in every direction. But Annalise was insulated from his chaos. Delilah Vance had moved swiftly, obtaining a restraining order that barred him from coming within 500 feet of the penthouse, or of Annalise herself. The locks were changed. The security team was a constant, silent presence. He was locked out of his home, his company was in free fall, and his reputation was in tatters. The final act of Annalise's revenge was designed to be the most personal, the most psychologically devastating. It was scheduled for the day of the Sotheby's auction. The auction room was packed. The art world cognoscenti wealthy collectors and museum curators were all there, eager for a chance to acquire a piece from the now infamous collection of Annalise Varenne. But there was another element in the room. The press. Annalise, through her PR firm, had ensured that journalists from every major news outlet were present ostensibly to cover the high-profile sale. In reality, they were there to witness the final humiliation of Julian Croft. Annalise was not there in person. She watched via a private live stream from the comfort of her penthouse, a cup of calming chamomile tea in her hand. She had done her part. Now she would watch the pieces fall. As the auction began, the first piece on the block was a small, intimate Warhol sketch of a soup can, a piece Julian had bought for her on their first anniversary. It sold for 3 times its estimate. The next, a vibrant Chagall, also soared past its expected price. The bidding was frenetic. The provenance of the collection, now tied to such a juicy high society scandal, had made it even more desirable. But the main event, the piece everyone was waiting for, was the last lot of the collection, Monet's Nymphaeas. The very painting Julian had failed to acquire the day he met Annalise. He had bought it for her a year later, surprising her with it on her birthday. A grand romantic gesture meant to symbolize that he could and would get anything he wanted. As the auctioneer introduced the Monet, a hush fell over the room. The painting, a swirling masterpiece of water lilies and reflected light, was projected onto a large screen. The bidding started high and climbed rapidly. 1 million, 2 million, 5. The numbers flew back and forth between 2 determined phone bidders. Then, just as the bidding reached $8 million, a commotion was heard at the back of the auction room. The press cameras swiveled in unison. It was Julian. He looked like a man who had been dragged through hell. His suit was rumpled, his face was pale and unshaven, his eyes wild with desperation. He had clearly violated the restraining order to be here. He stumbled into the room, pushing past the security guards who tried to stop him. "Stop!" he yelled, his voice cracking. "Stop the sale. That's my painting. This is all my property." The room erupted into chaos. The auctioneer banged his gavel, trying to restore order. The journalists surged forward, their cameras, flashing their microphones, extended to capture every second of the breakdown. Julian's eyes scanned the room, searching, lost. "Annalise!" he screamed, his voice now raw with anguish. "Annalise, please don't do this." He looked directly into one of the press cameras, as if he knew she would be watching. And in that moment, the arrogant billionaire, the powerful titan, the king of his own universe, finally broke. His face crumpled. Sobs, deep and racking, tore through him. Tears streamed down his pale, stubbled cheeks, unabashed and pathetic. He sank to his knees in the middle of the crowded, silent auction house, a king weeping amongst the ruins of his plundered kingdom. "I'm sorry," he whispered the words, choked by tears. "I've lost everything. I've lost you. I'm nothing without you. Please, come back." He looked up, his eyes pleading, not at the auctioneer, not at the crowd, but at the cold, impersonal lens of the camera. He was speaking to her and to the entire world. The image of the weeping millionaire, brought to his knees by the wife he had scorned, was instantly broadcast across the globe. In her silent penthouse, Annalise watched the screen, her face impassive. She felt a profound, aching sadness, not for him, but for the woman she had been. The woman who had loved him so completely, so naively. She felt a pang for the love she had thought was real, for the future she had thought they would share. But that woman was gone. She reached for her phone and sent a single text message to Delilah Vance. "It's done. File the papers." Then she stood up and walked over to the large window overlooking Central Park. The late afternoon sun cast a golden glow over the city. Below, life went on indifferent to the dramas of the wealthy and powerful. In the park, children were playing. Couples were strolling. A new world was waiting. She placed both hands on her belly, on the new life that was her future, her real legacy. The empire of Julian Croft was a heap of smouldering ash, but hers, the empire of Annalise Varenne, and her child was just beginning to rise. She was free, and for the first time in a very long time she smiled a genuine, peaceful smile, feeling the gentle, reassuring kick of the future within her. The revenge was complete. Now it was time to live. And there you have it, a story not just of betrayal, but of resurrection. Annalise's journey shows us that the deepest wounds can forge the strongest weapons, and that a woman's power, once unleashed, can topple any empire. She didn't just get even. She rewrote the rules of the game and built a new kingdom from the ashes of a broken heart. Her victory wasn't just in Julian's tears, but in her own quiet strength as she turned to face a future she alone would command. What did you think of Annalise's ultimate revenge? Was it justice, or was it too cold? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. If you were captivated by this story of love, betrayal, and epic revenge, please hit that like button. Share this video with someone who loves a good drama, and most importantly, subscribe to the channel for more unforgettable stories. Don't miss out on what's coming next. Picture a sprawling driveway lined with century-old oak trees, their branches forming a grand, shadowy canopy. At the end of this quiet approach stands the majestic Beauclair mansion, its marble columns gleaming under the moonlight. In the hush of midnight, a sleek black limousine pulls up to the front steps, delivering the triumphant millionaire Donovan Pierce. He's not alone. Clinging to his arm is Serena Quinn, a dazzling model with secrets of her own. Donovan steps out, brimming with confidence, prepared to flaunt his latest conquest. Little does he know, behind those massive double doors, his pregnant wife already waits, with a pair of earth-shattering surprises. Donovan Pierce was born in Santa Barbara, California, in the early 1980s. He was the youngest son of a middle-class family whose only luxury was a subscription to National Geographic. His parents, Randall and Josephine Pierce, both taught at the local community college. Though they were hardly wealthy, they instilled in Donovan the idea that knowledge could open doors that money alone could never pry open. Donovan, a sharp-eyed, wiry kid with a stubborn streak, found solace in reading about faraway lands. He dreamed of traveling to Africa, exploring the Amazon, and someday having enough money to live in a grand estate of his own. In high school, Donovan's natural charm made him popular among peers. Though not an exceptional athlete, he excelled in debate and showed a fierce determination to win any argument. Teachers praised him for his intelligence and tenacity, but behind the confident demeanor lay an unsatisfied hunger. He wanted more, always more. This insatiable thirst for success would become his defining trait, one that propelled him through life at breakneck speed. By the time he graduated, Donovan had his sights set on Stanford University. Through scholarships and financial aid, he secured enrollment in the prestigious institution. There, he fell in love with economics and business. By senior year, he was running an investment club with 40 members. They pooled their modest funds and tested the volatile waters of the stock market. Donovan didn't just want to break even, he wanted to crush the market. Armed with cunning strategies and long nights studying charts, he managed to bring their returns to remarkable heights. Word spread about his uncanny ability to see market trends before they became mainstream. Upon graduation, Donovan accepted a position at a well-known financial firm in New York. Only 22, he was already sitting in conference rooms with high-profile clients, including the likes of Warren Buffett's associates and other billionaires scouting fresh talent. Donovan took every opportunity he could to glean wisdom from these industry titans. His nights were spent with spreadsheets, analyzing stock movements, and his days were consumed by endless networking. Over the next decade, Donovan rose to prominence. He founded his own investment firm, Pierce Capital Management, and took his net worth from a humble few $1,000s to tens of millions, then hundreds of millions. Eventually, his name appeared on the covers of financial magazines. He became a recognized figure, invited to speak at conferences worldwide. Yet Donovan's ambition was boundless. He set his eyes on surpassing every record in the book and building a personal life that reflected his success. It was during this lofty ascent that he met Elizabeth Radcliffe, a descendant of old money. Elizabeth was a well-educated philanthropist, known for championing causes related to women's health. She was radiant in a quiet way, elegant, thoughtful, and with a moral compass that ran deeper than Donovan's relentless drive. Her mother, Caroline Radcliffe, was once part of a philanthropic circle involving the late Princess Diana, donating to charitable organizations across Europe. The Radcliffe heritage included a storied estate in the Hamptons and connections to aristocrats in England. Donovan was attracted to Elizabeth's poise and the air of dignity she carried wherever she went. Their relationship started gently long walks by the shoreline in East Hampton, quiet dinners at exclusive clubs, intellectual discussions about the future of finance and philanthropy. Before long, Donovan realized that Elizabeth wasn't just another accessory to be paraded around. She was a pillar of wisdom and stability, someone who kept him tethered to his humanity when greed tugged him off center. The world watched in fascination when Donovan and Elizabeth wed in a grand ceremony at the Radcliffe family's estate. Media outlets splashed their pictures across the front pages, calling it the merger of new money and old world grace. In an unexpected twist of sincerity, Donovan's vows to Elizabeth were heartfelt. He promised to love, protect, and treasure her, never letting wealth overshadow his devotion to her and any future family they might have. But the shadows of desire and ambition sometimes morph into darker forms. Even as Donovan soared to greater financial heights, he found himself haunted by a restless energy. He wanted excitement, passion, anything to satiate an appetite for novelty that neither Elizabeth's serene presence nor his legitimate business triumphs could fully feed. And so the seeds of betrayal were sown. Elizabeth's life had revolved around philanthropic ventures long before she met Donovan. But her marriage brought new challenges. She struggled to find a balance between supporting Donovan's insatiable ambitions and preserving her own identity. With each passing year, Donovan's name grew in the financial sector, which meant more publicity, more parties, more demands. Elizabeth attended numerous galas as the gracious hostess. She wore dazzling gowns, smiled for photos, and patiently listened to endless conversations about stocks and corporate expansions. In private, Elizabeth was not as meek as the media painted her to be. She had her convictions. She often confronted Donovan about certain investments that seemed questionable, environmentally damaging ventures, profits extracted from borderline unethical deals. Donovan would smile and reassure her that everything was within legal bounds. "This is how we fund your charities," he teased. "We do well, and then we do good." Most of the time, Elizabeth would sigh, letting the conversation fade. She recognized that Donovan's approach to business was a far cry from her father's genteel style. Still, she believed in her husband's underlying decency. Years into the marriage, Elizabeth yearned for a child. At first, Donovan brushed off the topic. "Let's solidify the business," he would say. "Let me cross a few major milestones, and then we'll talk about starting a family." Deep down, Elizabeth suspected Donovan was afraid to be pinned down by the responsibilities of fatherhood. He thrived on risk spontaneity and the freedom to jet off to Europe or Asia at a moment's notice if a deal demanded it. However, the unstoppable march of time and a near-death experience, Elizabeth's father had a sudden stroke, galvanized them. Realizing how fragile life could be, Donovan agreed they should try for a child. In the following months, Elizabeth discovered she was pregnant, and the new reality thrilled her. She glowed with expectancy, her philanthropic work pivoting to focus on maternal health and child welfare. Donovan seemed happy about the news at first, but his reaction lacked the effusive zeal Elizabeth had hoped for. She told herself it was simply Donovan's nature to remain collected, even about momentous life changes. During the pregnancy, Elizabeth took refuge in the quiet comforts of Beauclair Mansion, an estate the couple had purchased in the countryside of upstate New York. Surrounded by lush forests and rolling hills, it provided the perfect retreat from the swirling chaos of Manhattan life. There, away from public scrutiny, Elizabeth could focus on preparing for motherhood. Donovan often visited on weekends, always claiming he was too busy with urgent business deals during the week. As months rolled on, Elizabeth began to suspect that Donovan's late nights and business trips might not all be about closing deals. Even so, Elizabeth tried to cast aside her doubts. She had twins on the way, 2 lives growing within her 2 blessings that she believed would knit her and Donovan closer together. She wrote in her diary each day, documenting every emotional shift, every flutter in her belly, and every dream she had of a future filled with children's laughter, echoing through the mansion's halls. In these private moments, Elizabeth recounted her grandmother's stories of how love in a marriage was tested in unthinkable ways, but devotion and faith often carried couples through the darkest storms. She had no idea that her test would come so soon, or in such a heart-wrenching manner. Serena Quinn was the kind of woman people instinctively watched as soon as she walked into a room. With almond-shaped hazel eyes and wavy auburn hair cascading to her waist, she emanated a fiery energy that demanded attention. She had been raised in a modest household in San Diego, her father a retired Marine, her mother a struggling painter. Despite their limited means, Serena's parents poured their hearts into supporting her talents, whether it was ballet painting or modeling. By 18, Serena signed with an upscale modeling agency and discovered a taste for the finer things in life. The swirling lights of fashion, shows designer gowns, and the glittering stares of cameras dazzled her. She lived for backstage parties and exclusive VIP events where she rubbed shoulders with celebrities and moguls. Over time, she learned how to charm men of power. That charm wasn't always innocent. For Serena, it became a method of survival and advancement in a cutthroat world. If she played her cards right, she could secure financial stability that might otherwise elude her. Her path crossed with Donovan Pierce on a private yacht off the coast of Monaco. Donovan was there for a high-profile tech conference, and Serena had been hired to model for a European luxury brand. The second Donovan saw her laughing on the deck wearing an opulent emerald gown that clung to her figure, he felt an old, forbidden spark ignite. He introduced himself with characteristic smoothness, Donovan Pierce, of Pierce Capital Management. Might I ask whose stunning presence I'm fortunate enough to share this deck with? Serena knew the name anyone in high society did. She smiled coyly. Serena Quinn. A pleasure to meet you, Mr. Pierce. Over champagne flutes, they exchanged banter about the future of cryptocurrencies and the enthralling but superficial nature of fashion. She was witty. He was enthralled. One conversation led to another, and soon the shimmering lights of Monaco's coastline faded into the hush of the night. Donovan found himself lost in Serena's raw magnetism, a stark contrast to Elizabeth's graceful composure. Despite knowing full well that he was married, his ring was conspicuous, and the media had documented his marriage extensively. Serena fueled Donovan's flirtation. To her, men like Donovan offered not just adventure, but entry into circles with deeper pockets. The moral transgression didn't worry her. She had grown accustomed to seeing powerful men cheat on their wives, and in her line of work, infidelity was treated as a negotiable taboo. Before the yacht docked, Donovan and Serena shared a clandestine kiss on the upper deck, hidden from prying eyes by the summer darkness. Donovan told himself it was just a fleeting moment of indiscretion. He was a man on top of the world. Why shouldn't he savor every flavor of pleasure life offered? But fleeting infatuations can quickly grow into an all-consuming secret. When Donovan returned to New York, he found excuses to see Serena again, ostensibly for business, though they both knew it was anything but. She became his shadow at exclusive clubs, late-night penthouse soirees and business trips where he needed a companion to keep him entertained. He showered her with designer handbags, diamond jewelry, and even helped her land more lucrative modeling gigs. Serena, for her part, clung to Donovan's generosity, offering him the rush of a hidden romance he couldn't get from his stable married life. Weeks turned into months, and their affair deepened. Serena reveled in the luxurious life Donovan provided: 5-star hotels, exotic vacations, lavish gifts. Meanwhile, Donovan craved her presence like a drug, ignoring any semblance of guilt. He told himself Elizabeth was preoccupied with her charities. Her pregnancy, there was no harm in letting off some steam. In a moment of recklessness, Donovan invited Serena to spend a weekend at Beauclair Mansion. It was an impulsive plan, born from a chaotic swirl of desire and pride. After all, Elizabeth was supposed to be spending those days in Manhattan for a friend's baby shower, or so Donovan believed. Little did he realize Elizabeth had cut her city trip short, too exhausted to endure the social rigmarole, and determined to relax in her own home. Destiny was about to orchestrate a collision of secrets, lies, and revelations that would upend everyone's lives. Under the silver glow of a crescent moon, Donovan's limousine glided up to Beauclair Mansion's gates. The estate's sweeping landscape looked hauntingly beautiful. Tall cypress trees swayed, and the ornate fountain at the entrance sparkled with watery moonbeams. Serena leaned against Donovan in the back seat, her manicured nails lightly tracing patterns on his arm. She giggled. "I can't believe you own all of this. It's like a castle from a fairy tale." "Wait until you see the inside," Donovan bragged. "Your jaw will drop." He had always wanted to show off Beauclair to Serena. It was one of his ultimate trophies, a testament to how far he'd climbed from his humble upbringing. He had told the chauffeur to arrive late, betting that the staff would be minimal at this hour. Normally, Elizabeth might have been at the mansion, but Donovan was confident she was in Manhattan until Monday. He anticipated a weekend of unrestrained passion and indulgence, free from prying eyes and moral repercussions. To ensure privacy, Donovan had earlier texted Mrs. Hathaway, Beauclair's long-standing housekeeper, telling her to take Sunday off. He explained that he had a private gathering with an important client. Mrs. Hathaway dutifully obeyed, leaving only a skeleton crew on night duty. Donovan had also given strict instructions to keep the gates closed and to remain out of sight unless summoned. Everything was orchestrated like a stage play, with Donovan as the star performer. However, Donovan's carefully crafted plan crumbled the moment the limousine approached the circular driveway. The grand double doors of the mansion swung open, and out stepped Elizabeth. Clearly pregnant, her usually gentle face etched with outrage. Her hand rested protectively on her belly, the fabric of her pale blue maternity dress fluttering in the night breeze. The overhead carriage lights illuminated her figure, making her look both ethereal and formidable. Donovan felt his breath catch in his throat. Confusion and dread erupted within him. For a moment, Serena was just as stupefied, her eyes darting between Donovan and the furious woman on the threshold. "Who is that?" she whispered sharply, though deep down she suspected the answer. No one spoke as the driver opened the door. Donovan stepped out first, feeling as though he were walking into a vortex of shame and disbelief. Elizabeth's voice finally cut through the silence. "So it's true," she hissed. "All the late nights, the secret phone calls, I tried to tell myself I was just being paranoid." Donovan opened his mouth but couldn't form words. Elizabeth's expression twisted a lethal mix of heartbreak and anger. Her gaze flicked to Serena, who also emerged from the limousine, her face partially hidden by large designer sunglasses she'd neglected to remove. For a second, Serena contemplated slinking back inside the car, but she was too frozen to move. Beneath the mansion's elegant facade, the entire world was about to unravel. Inside Beauclair's sweeping foyer, marbled floors gleamed under a chandelier of crystal teardrops. Donovan stood rooted near the grand staircase, Serena a few feet behind him, feeling acutely like an intruder. Elizabeth, with tears in her eyes, demanded answers. Her voice echoed off the polished surfaces, driving home the magnitude of this confrontation. "How long has this been going on?" she shouted, eyes locked on Donovan. "How many times have you lied to me?" Serena's gaze darted nervously. She cleared her throat and decided on an apology, but it sounded hollow even to her own ears. "I'm so sorry." I didn't realize Elizabeth cut her off. "Didn't realize what exactly? That he has a wife? That I'm carrying his children?" Her voice trembled with bitterness, and her hands pressed against her swollen belly. Donovan finally snapped out of his stupor. "Elizabeth!" He began stepping closer. "I didn't mean for any of this." She pulled away, tears shimmering on the brink. "Don't come near me." At that moment, thunder rumbled in the distance. It felt as though nature itself lamented the betrayal unfolding within Beauclair's walls. Donovan's mind churned, searching for a plausible explanation, an apology, a gesture that might quell the fury and heartbreak swirling through the foyer. Yet nothing he could say would excuse what he'd done. Behind him, Serena said softly, "I'll just get my things and go." She aimed for an exit strategy, hoping to salvage any shred of dignity. But Elizabeth wasn't done. "So you leave now, and what then? Another rendezvous in some penthouse next week? Another weekend in a mansion you both think you own?" She shot Donovan a look of pure venom. "You want to embarrass me in front of the entire world, Donovan, because the paparazzi will eat this alive. There's no hiding from it." A hush enveloped them, broken only by the faint pitter-patter of rain starting outside. Serena gripped her handbag, panic in her eyes. Donovan realized in that instant the severity of his situation. A pregnant wife, a mistress, and a public image that could collapse under the weight of scandal. Before anyone could speak again, Elizabeth crumpled to her knees, a sharp cry escaping her lips. Donovan rushed to her side, alarmed. "Elizabeth," he exclaimed, "what's wrong?" Her face contorted in pain, her arms instinctively encircling her belly. I think something's wrong with the babies." The sight of Elizabeth in apparent distress jolted Donovan's paternal instincts. He forgot about Serena, about the affair, about everything else. He scooped Elizabeth into his arms. "We need to get you to the hospital," he said, voice trembling. At his instruction, the still-present chauffeur quickly rearranged plans to drive to the nearest emergency room. By now, Serena was shaking, unsure if she should stay or slip out unnoticed. Ultimately, she followed them to the limousine perched uncomfortably in the back seat, while Donovan cradled Elizabeth. The ride felt like an eternity each second, thick with tension and fear. Never had Donovan felt so powerless. This was not a financial crisis he could fix with a quick injection of capital or a brilliant stock trade. He was on the brink of losing everything he claimed mattered to him, and possibly even losing the unborn children he had so carelessly taken for granted. They arrived at St. Bernardine's Medical Center in the dead of night, the doors of the emergency ward sliding open under harsh fluorescent lights. Nurses rushed Elizabeth into an examination room, Donovan trailing closely behind. He hovered by her side, watching with dread as monitors beeped and doctors administered IV lines. Serena lingered in the waiting area, hands clasped tightly, face pale. She felt starkly out of place. A nurse, noticing her anxious demeanor, whispered, "Are you family?" Serena shook her head, barely managing a polite smile. She took a seat, struggling with a mix of guilt, fear, and resentment. Resentment toward Donovan for putting her in this humiliating position. Guilt for playing a role in what might be a catastrophic medical emergency. Inside the examination room, the obstetrician delivered cautious news. Elizabeth was having contractions prematurely, possibly triggered by emotional stress. The babies were at risk if her blood pressure didn't stabilize soon. Donovan felt a crushing weight. This was the real consequence of his duplicity. Not just an angry spouse or a ruined social reputation, but the potential harm to innocent lives. With quiet efficiency, Elizabeth was transferred to a private room in the maternity wing. Donovan sat by her bedside, stroking her hand, feeling both helpless and regretful. He tried to speak to offer some comfort, but Elizabeth flinched away. Her eyes flickered with pain and betrayal. She was a woman who had given her heart, body, and trust to a man who'd taken all three for granted. Hours crawled by. The hospital's white corridors and antiseptic odor provided the backdrop for Donovan's introspection. He had always prided himself on having control over markets, over deals, over his life's narrative. Yet here he was, powerless. In the waiting area, Serena wrestled with her own turmoil. She texted a friend. "Stuck at a hospital. Disaster night. Call you later." She couldn't bring herself to leave. A part of her needed closure, needed Donovan to acknowledge her. But as dawn approached, she realized how naive that longing was. She overheard bits of conversation between nurses. Elizabeth was stabilized, the twins appeared unharmed for now. But the emotional damage was incalculable. Eventually, Donovan emerged from Elizabeth's room, dark circles under his eyes. He approached Serena, who stood up hastily, her posture stiff. In the empty corridor, they exchanged hushed words. "Are you okay?" Serena asked, her voice trembling with concern. "Not really." Donovan admitted, his tone frayed. "Elizabeth's resting now. The babies seem to be okay, but it was close. I can't." He swallowed, unable to complete the thought. Serena nodded slowly, tears threatening to spill. "I didn't want this to happen." Donovan let out a shaky breath. "Go back to the mansion, or a hotel. I'll make arrangements for you. But I can't leave Elizabeth." Serena searched his face, hoping for some signal that their relationship mattered. Instead, she saw a broken man, guilt-ridden and desperate to cling to his wife and unborn children. Words felt futile. She only managed a nod before turning to walk away, the corridor lights flickering overhead like a silent judgment. In that moment, Donovan understood that the life he thought he could compartmentalize was shattered. There would be no neat division between his respectable existence with Elizabeth and his clandestine affair with Serena. Everything had collided, and the fallout would test every inch of his fortitude and Elizabeth's. News travels fast in privileged circles. By mid-morning, Elizabeth's parents, Andrew and Caroline Radcliffe, arrived at the hospital in a flurry of concern and indignation. Caroline, her posture ramrod straight, confronted Donovan in the corridor. "You liar!" she hissed, jabbing a finger at his chest. "You made promises, Donovan. My daughter's life and the lives of my grandchildren are at risk because of your disgraceful behavior." Andrew, a gentle man by nature, seemed older and more frail than usual, grief etching lines across his face. "I trusted you," he said softly, his voice laden with disappointment. "You were the one who insisted on waiting for children until you were ready to be a father. And now this Donovan bowed his head, too ashamed to meet their gazes. "I'm sorry," he murmured. "Truly I am. Nothing I say will justify what happened." Caroline gave a scornful laugh. "That's about the only honest thing you've said so far." With Elizabeth stable but emotionally shattered, the medical staff advised minimal stress to prevent another crisis. It was agreed that for now, Donovan could stay at the hospital. He was, after all, Elizabeth's next of kin, but the Radcliffes made it clear they'd watch him like hawks. Every hour, Donovan checked in on Elizabeth, who maintained a stony silence. She gazed out the window, tears occasionally sliding down her cheeks. Sometimes Donovan tried to hold her hand or whisper an apology. Each time, she pulled away. When evening arrived, the Radcliffes insisted on a family discussion without Elizabeth. Donovan, Andrew, and Caroline convened in a small hospital cafeteria, the smell of coffee and antiseptic heavy in the air. The conversation was tense voices, kept to a low hush. Caroline wasted no time. "Donovan, we want you to leave Elizabeth alone until she recovers. You'll take care of her medical expenses, of course, but you're to stay away until she explicitly asks for you." "Understood." Donovan's mouth felt dry. "Elizabeth is my wife. I can't abandon her in the hospital." Andrew softened his tone. "We're not saying abandon her. We're saying give her space. Right now, your presence might be doing more harm than good." Caroline's eyes narrowed. "Who knows how many indiscretions you've had behind her back? As far as I'm concerned, you have a lot of explaining to do." "Yes," Andrew agreed. "And perhaps to a divorce lawyer as well." The word divorce lodged like a bullet in Donovan's chest. He'd never considered that Elizabeth might actually leave him and take the children with her. The possibility ripped open a chasm of fear. At that moment, Donovan realized how precarious his entire empire was. Losing Elizabeth didn't just mean losing the facade of a happy marriage. It could also mean losing the moral anchor that had partially legitimatized his high society persona. Without Elizabeth, Donovan Pierce was just another scheming, heartless tycoon with questionable ethics and no family to give him depth or redemption. "Please," he murmured, voice raw. "Don't talk of divorce yet. Let me do whatever it takes to earn her trust back." Caroline exhaled sharply. "That's up to Elizabeth. For now, respect her wishes. If she wants to see you, fine. If she doesn't, you'll keep away." Donovan nodded, too grief-stricken to argue. The only thing that mattered now was Elizabeth's health and the safety of the twins. Little by little, he realized the irreparable damage he'd caused. If he ever wanted to regain Elizabeth's love, or even her tolerance, he would have to face an arduous road of restitution, if such a thing was even possible. The weekend passed in a blur. Elizabeth showed signs of improvement, though her emotional wounds were far from healed. Donovan took Caroline's advice and stayed mostly away, visiting briefly when Elizabeth gave the green light. He spent his nights at a penthouse suite in a nearby hotel, making calls to business associates and cancelling all non-essential trips. Serena Quinn, meanwhile, disappeared from his immediate orbit. He'd arranged for her to stay in a luxurious suite at the Ritz-Carlton, and he covered the tab without question. Their exchanges were reduced to terse text messages. She resented being sidelined, but had no choice. During this tumultuous period, Donovan discovered that personal crises had a way of exposing hidden vulnerabilities in his business empire. A damaging rumor circulated that he was stepping away from Pierce Capital Management due to family issues. Boards of directors, already anxious about market fluctuations, began to question the stability of Donovan's leadership. Some clients hinted they might shift their funds elsewhere if Donovan couldn't personally oversee their accounts. In the midst of these professional woes, Donovan received an unexpected visitor, Rita Halberd, a young journalist from a prominent financial magazine. Rita had sensed the scandal swirling around the Pierce household and wanted an exclusive story. She cornered Donovan in the hospital lobby, a polite but determined expression on her face. "Mr. Pierce, I'm so sorry to bother you at this difficult time." She began pressing the record button on her phone. "But rumors are circulating about trouble in your personal life affecting your company. Is there any comment you'd like to make?" Donovan forced a composed smile. "I don't discuss personal matters with the press, Miss Halberd. My family is my priority right now. Pierce Capital Management remains fully operational." Rita persisted. "Any truth to the allegations about an affair causing your wife's hospitalization?" His jaw clenched. No comment. When a security guard intervened, escorting Rita away, Donovan felt a jolt of dread. Despite his best attempts to keep the scandal under wraps, the story was leaking. He later discovered that paparazzi photos of him and Serena in Monte Carlo had been making rounds online, fueling speculation. The worst part was that Elizabeth's heartbreak was now tabloid fodder. Back at Beauclair Mansion, Elizabeth returned to recuperate under medical supervision. Her parents insisted on staying with her, but she also had some quiet moments to reflect. Late one afternoon, Elizabeth found her way to a seldom-used drawing room lined with dusty oil paintings of the estate's previous owners. There she sank into a velvet armchair, a cup of chamomile tea in hand. Her mind replayed the last few days, the confrontation, the hospital, scare, the taste of betrayal. She recalled times when Donovan had been tender and loving, such as the night he proposed. He had taken her to a small island off the coast of Croatia, where they strolled along a moonlit beach. He promised her a life of wonder and fulfillment. Now those sweet memories clashed with the stinging reality of his infidelity. She wondered if she had been naive, ignoring subtle warning signs all along. The late-night calls, the new cologne that smelled nothing like Donovan's usual preference, the random missing hours he could never fully explain. Perhaps she should have confronted him sooner. Perhaps she should have demanded he slow down, focus on their marriage, before it was too late. But regrets, she realized, could never undo the present. In a small burst of determination, Elizabeth pressed a hand against her belly. The twins moved gently, as if sensing her emotions. She whispered, "We'll be okay. With or without him, we'll make it." For all her heartbreak, Elizabeth realized she wasn't powerless. She had the children to think about, and her own dignity. If Donovan thought he could just walk in and out of their lives at will, he was mistaken. Serena Quinn, temporarily sequestered in the Ritz-Carlton, found that the novelty of plush robes and room service quickly waned when tethered to a scandal. She felt like a caged bird, feeding on scraps of reassurance from Donovan's sporadic texts. "We'll talk soon," he would say, or "Need time to handle family matters." Weeks ago, Serena would have found these messages acceptable, even promising. Now they felt dismissive. She resented being treated as an inconvenient afterthought. One evening, in a fit of frustration, she sought out an old friend in the city, a PR specialist named Miranda Vale. Over cocktails, Serena vented about her predicament, the broken promises, the mansion fiasco, and her uncertain future. Miranda listened with rapt attention, occasionally nodding or taking a sip of her martini. "You're so worried about Donovan's image," Miranda observed. "But what about yours? You stand to lose modeling contracts if this scandal blows up. Or you might actually use it to your advantage if you play your cards right." Serena bristled. She wasn't looking to become some gossip sensation. Yet the suggestion swirled in her mind. How could she salvage her own life? Maybe even elevate her status from this mess. A few days later, Miranda set up a clandestine meeting with a tabloid journalist, Kevin Brown, who was offering top dollar for an exclusive interview from the other woman. Serena vacillated. Did she really want to risk Donovan's wrath by selling their story? But the more Donovan ignored her calls, and the more anxious she felt about her livelihood, the more tempting the offer became. Finally, after one particularly icy text from Donovan, "I can't talk right now." "Please stop calling," Serena snapped. She had built her entire adult life on leveraging opportunities. Why should Donovan Pierce escape unscathed, preserving his marriage and reputation, while leaving her hung out to dry? So Serena met with Kevin Brown in a posh rooftop lounge, wearing oversized sunglasses and a scarf to hide her identity. She demanded a sizable sum for any details about her affair with Donovan Pierce. Kevin, practically salivating at the prospect of a sensational scoop, agreed. Over hours and multiple drinks, Serena spilled enough intimate details to fuel a front-page headline in every major tabloid. She revealed their first meeting in Monaco, the hush-hush texts, the gifts, the clandestine weekends. The only thing she kept vague was the fiasco at Beauclair Mansion. Some details, she reasoned, might prove too dangerous or humiliating if fully exposed. By the time she left, the weight on Serena's shoulders felt partially lifted. She knew the story would break soon, that Donovan would likely feel betrayed and furious. But she also knew she needed to watch out for her own interests. If Donovan wasn't going to make good on his unspoken promises, if he was going to return to Elizabeth and freeze Serena out, then maybe Serena could seize control of the narrative. In a world where wealth and reputation meant everything public sympathy could be leveraged, perhaps in the end, she'd emerge from the scandal not as a regretful mistress, but as a cunning survivor. A week later, the tabloids erupted with headlines. Exclusive model Serena Quinn speaks out on Donovan Pierce affair. The public devoured every detail like vultures on fresh carrion. Pictures of Serena in Monaco in Donovan's penthouse and near Beauclair Mansion splashed across websites and social media feeds. Gossip shows debated the morality of powerful men who think they can have it all. Stock pundits speculated whether Pierce Capital Management would suffer a mass exodus of clients. Donovan woke up to a flurry of panicked calls from business partners, lawyers, and friends. Fury coursed through him at Serena's betrayal. He drafted multiple messages to her, each more accusatory than the last. But he never pressed send. He understood that escalation could lead to more damaging revelations. Instead, he pivoted into damage control, a meeting with his legal team to discuss defamation suits, a press statement asserting that personal matters do not affect the integrity of Pierce Capital's mission, and frantic phone calls to major stakeholders reassuring them he was still firmly at the helm. Elizabeth, meanwhile, read the tabloids with disgust and heartbreak. She had heard enough from Donovan's admissions and the partial truths gleaned from staff at Beauclair. But seeing Serena's smug face on the covers made it all more real. Her parents tried to shield her from the media storm, but the magnitude was impossible to ignore. At one point, Elizabeth snapped at Caroline. "No more. I don't want to hear or see anything about that woman. It's my life, my marriage. I'll decide how to handle it." Yet a part of Elizabeth felt a strange, unexpected relief. The entire truth was now out there, no more secrets lurking. Donovan's humiliating betrayal was an open wound. Sometimes honesty, even when dragged unwillingly into the public eye, can mark the beginning of genuine healing or a definitive end. A few days into the media circus, Donovan managed to speak privately with Elizabeth at Beauclair. She was seated in the sunroom, a blanket over her lap, the warm glow of afternoon light shining through large glass windows. Her pregnancy was still precarious, but stable. A nurse milled about, ensuring Elizabeth's comfort. Donovan took a seat across from her, hands clasped. He looked thinner than usual, his eyes hollow with regret. "Elizabeth," he began, voice quivering. "I know I can never fully undo what I've done. But I want you to know I'm willing to do anything to make this right." She regarded him with a calmness that unnerved him. "You can't unbreak a heart, Donovan," she replied. "You can only see what grows from the pieces left behind." He swallowed hard, remembering the luminous woman he had married. The thought of losing her and the children shredded whatever bravado remained. "I'm committed to therapy, to counseling, anything you need. You and the twins are my priority now. I understand if you hate me, or if you'll never trust me again. But I want to try." Elizabeth let out a slow exhale. "I don't have answers yet. I need time to figure out what's best for me, and for our children. Right now, I need stability, no more public scandals, no more late-night cat-and-mouse games." "Can you promise me that much?" "Yes," Donovan whispered, tears pricking his eyes. "I promise." Elizabeth nodded. "Then give me space. Provide what I need for the babies and me. Maybe in time, we'll see if there's anything left of this marriage to salvage." Donovan rose to leave, feeling the smallest glimmer of hope. He bent down gently, kissed Elizabeth's forehead. She didn't resist, but neither did she reciprocate. He walked away with a reverent hush in his chest, determined to do better, uncertain if redemption was truly within reach. The next several months were a crucible of transformation for everyone involved. Elizabeth stayed at Beauclair Mansion, supported by private nurses and her parents. She meticulously prepared for the twins' arrival, reading parenting books, setting up a nursery, and confiding in a therapist recommended by her obstetrician. She recognized that despite Donovan's betrayal, her children deserved a father if he could prove worthy. Yet she also realized she was no longer the passive partner she might once have been. She contacted divorce lawyers, not as a definitive move, but as a precaution. Boundaries had to be drawn. Donovan embarked on a public apology tour, though not the typical kind with press conferences. Instead, he quietly reached out to key figures in his professional circle, explaining that he was going through a personal crisis and assuring them of his unwavering commitment to Pierce Capital. He donated a significant sum to maternal health charities, a gesture partly inspired by guilt, partly by a genuine desire to mend the harm. In a rare display of humility, he sought out a private counselor, a stepsister of a friend. Sessions were grueling, forcing him to confront his reckless impulses, his childhood insecurities, and the toxic pursuit of wealth as a balm for every emotion. He began to see that the same drive that made him a financial success had also corroded his personal life. Serena, meanwhile, found herself both famous and infamous. She was approached by multiple agencies to exploit her new celebrity, but serious brands viewed her as a liability. She capitalized on her notoriety by launching a line of low-tier beauty products, hawked relentlessly on social media. Certain tabloids praised her for bravery in exposing a billionaire, but the more discerning corners of society labeled her a shameless opportunist. She struggled with the knowledge that she might never escape the shadow of this scandal. On lonely nights in her new penthouse, a parting gift from a short-lived romance with another wealthy patron, she questioned whether she had really gained anything from this affair or simply sabotaged her own integrity. As for the public, the scandal became old news once another sensational headline captured their short attention span: Donovan Pierce and Elizabeth Radcliffe. Pierce were yesterday's gossip replaced by new controversies. However, the financial world did not forget so quickly. Donovan faced extra scrutiny in every new venture. Some of his bolder clients grew leery, no longer seeing him as infallible. He moved carefully, treading water to maintain his empire's stability, while balancing the turbulent waters of his personal life. On a chilly December evening, months after the scandal first broke, Elizabeth went into labor. The staff at Beauclair hustled, calling the doctor and preparing to take her to the hospital. Donovan, who was in Manhattan finalizing a major business deal, was alerted immediately. Without hesitation, he dropped everything. He had a private helicopter on standby for emergencies, and this was certainly one. Within an hour, Donovan arrived at the hospital breathless and terrified. He found Elizabeth already in the delivery room, her face contorted with pain, her parents at her side. She spotted Donovan, and a fleeting look of relief crossed her features before another contraction seized her. All through the grueling hours, Donovan held Elizabeth's hand. Each time she cried out, he whispered words of encouragement, telling her how strong she was, how close they were to finally holding their children. If she bore any lingering resentment, it was eclipsed by the primal, overwhelming task of giving birth. At precisely 2:14 a.m., the first baby emerged a boy with tiny flailing limbs and a robust cry. The doctor smiled. "He's healthy," she announced, placing the newborn on Elizabeth's chest. A minute later, his twin sister followed, smaller, but equally vocal about her entrance into the world. Donovan was unable to contain his tears as he beheld his children for the first time. He kissed Elizabeth's forehead, flooding with gratitude, regret, and awe all at once. Elizabeth turned to look at him, tears in her own eyes, and gave a single nod of acknowledgement. It was too soon to say if forgiveness was in the cards, but at that moment they were bound by the pure miracle of these new lives. In the weeks following the twins' birth, a cautious détente settled over Beauclair Mansion. Elizabeth allowed Donovan to stay in a guest suite. He took paternal leave from Pierce Capital, focusing on midnight feedings, diaper changes, and singing lullabies. The cracks in their relationship remained, but caring for their infants forged a tenuous bridge. The twins, named Alexander and Amelia, became the center of everyone's world. Donovan discovered that holding these fragile beings in his arms gave him a sense of purpose far beyond financial gain. Some nights he'd find Elizabeth gazing at him, a flicker of surprise in her eyes at how dedicated a father he'd become. Other nights, tensions rose particularly when the memory of his betrayal loomed. But the babies acted as a balm, reminding both parents that they had two tiny reasons to try. Elizabeth's parents helped, but eventually they returned to their own estate, trusting that Elizabeth was strong enough now to stand on her own. A wave of quiet negotiations began between Elizabeth's legal team and Donovan's lawyers' discussions about trusts for the children, potential separation agreements, property, settlements. Yet Elizabeth remained non-committal about a final decision. She sought more clarity on Donovan's sincerity before making her choice. At times, Donovan found himself on the edge of losing patience. He wanted redemption, wanted Elizabeth to declare that they could fully reconcile. But each time he felt that eagerness, he reminded himself that trust once shattered cannot be hastily mended. He forced himself to give Elizabeth space to keep proving day by day that he could be the man she and their children deserved. And so life took on a quiet rhythm. Nighttime feedings under the mansion's vaulted ceilings, squeals of newborn laughter in the morning, and guarded conversations in the afternoon. Donovan learned that fatherhood wasn't just a new label, it was an all-consuming transformative role. And Elizabeth, for all her heartbreak, found moments of solace watching Donovan cradle their infants, singing lullabies in a soft, unsteady voice she'd never heard from him before. Winter gradually yielded to spring, bringing fresh growth to Beauclair's gardens. Sunlight filtered through newly budded branches, and the estate's fountain sparkled under warmer skies. The twins reached 3 months old, their personalities beginning to blossom. Alexander was feisty, always squirming, while Amelia was calmer, observing the world with large, curious eyes. One afternoon, after putting the twins down for a nap, Donovan and Elizabeth found themselves alone in the mansion's reading room. The subdued light cast gentle shadows on the library shelves. It was the first time in weeks they'd had a private moment uninterrupted by crying babies or house staff. Elizabeth studied Donovan for a long moment. "I've seen a change in you," she said quietly. He felt his chest tighten. "I've never been more serious about anything. These months with the twins with you, they've shown me what really matters." Elizabeth pressed her lips together, tears threatening to surface. "I don't trust you fully yet," she admitted, voice trembling. "But I see you trying, and I care that our children have a real family." Donovan reached for her hand. She allowed him to take it this time, though her grip was tentative. "I love you," he said with fervor. "I always have in my own flawed way." She closed her eyes, letting tears slip through. In that vulnerable moment, Elizabeth acknowledged that despite the immense pain Donovan had caused, she still loved him too. Love wasn't a neat equation. It was messy, painful, beautiful, and worth fighting for sometimes. No magical instant of absolute forgiveness followed. Instead, they shared a deep, trembling embrace. Perhaps it was the start of building anew, or maybe a final farewell. But for that moment, it was enough to close the distance that had been tearing them apart. Over time, marriage counseling sessions were arranged. Trust exercises, honest conversations, and raw confessions filled many evenings. Donovan penned a heartfelt letter to Elizabeth, acknowledging every lie and vow he had broken. Elizabeth read it through tears, then wrote a response describing her own fears and disappointments. Though the future remained uncertain, both were willing to try. For the sake of the twins, for the sake of their own hearts, they forged ahead, cautious, hopeful, and forever changed. Months passed gradually, healing old wounds, though scars lingered. Donovan and Elizabeth decided to continue living at Beauclair, turning it into a sanctuary rather than a battlefield. The staff treated Donovan with polite reserve, aware of the rift in the household, but also noticing the genuine effort he invested in fatherhood. Serena Quinn drifted to the periphery of their lives. She launched a small cosmetics brand online, capitalizing on her short-lived tabloid fame, but her presence receded from major headlines. Donovan never reached out to her, and she, sensing no benefit to further contact, eventually moved on to new opportunities. Rumors linked her to an international art dealer, but the story never garnered much attention. In time, the media found fresh scandals to chase. Donovan's public persona stabilized as he demonstrated consistent leadership in his company, all the while making philanthropic gestures, no doubt influenced by Elizabeth's passions. Some cynics claimed he was simply buying redemption, but those closer to him sensed that fatherhood and near loss had sparked a more meaningful shift. Elizabeth remained cautious. Though she allowed Donovan back into her bed, she set firm boundaries about honesty and transparency. She demanded and received proof of Donovan's finances, phone records, and schedules. Some nights, guilt gnawed at Donovan. He realized how easily he used to lie and manipulate. Now each day of truth felt like a small victory. In the hush of dawn, Donovan often rose to check on Alexander and Amelia. He found solace in their innocent breathing, their tiny bodies nestled securely in cribs. As he watched them, he whispered apologies for his past and promises for their future. Each promise was a vow to be better, a father they could respect, a husband Elizabeth could count on. Exactly 1 year after Donovan's fateful return to Beauclair, with Serena in tow, Elizabeth woke before sunrise. She gazed at Donovan sleeping beside her, his hair disheveled, his face peaceful in slumber. She slipped out of bed and tiptoed to the twins' nursery. Sunlight broke over the horizon, illuminating Alexander's curious expression and Amelia's gentle coos. Elizabeth scooped them into her arms, one on each hip, and felt a rush of gratitude so strong it nearly overwhelmed her. Shortly after, Donovan entered, rubbing sleep from his eyes. "Morning," he said softly, placing a tender kiss on each baby's forehead. Then he looked at Elizabeth, searching her face for signs of acceptance. She offered a small smile. The tension that once gripped their every interaction had eased, replaced by a quiet understanding. They carried the twins downstairs to the breakfast table, where the staff prepared a light meal. Over coffee and pureed fruit for the babies, Elizabeth cleared her throat. "I have an announcement," she said, drawing Donovan's full attention. "I'm ready to give us a real chance. No more guest suite, no more half measures. But Donovan, if you ever betray me again, that's it. We're done." He felt the air rush from his lungs, relief washing over him. "I won't. I promise." He reached across the table and gently squeezed her hand. Their eyes locked in a moment of unspoken agreement. Months of therapy, raw conversations, and unwavering devotion to their children had led them here, still bruised but willing to live as a unified family. The rebuilding process had been painstaking each day, a test of Donovan's sincerity and Elizabeth's capacity for forgiveness. In that single instant, they both chose hope over resentment, a future over a fractured past. From the brink of a devastating split to a fragile but genuine renewal, Donovan and Elizabeth's journey reminds us that no life is beyond repair, even in the face of betrayal, heartbreak, and public scandal. Sometimes the hardest lessons come wrapped in pain and regret, but it's how we grow from them that truly defines our story. Through newborn cries and sleepless nights, they discovered a new depth of love and unity, proving that second chances, while never guaranteed, can blossom if nurtured with honesty and perseverance. If this story moved you, if it made you reflect on the power of forgiveness, the complexity of desire, or the resilience of family, please share it with someone who might need the message. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to our channel for more compelling stories that shine a light on the raw, dramatic twists of life. After all, every life holds a chapter that can inspire someone else's healing.